You won, brother.
Okay. Okay. Well, I don't know how many of you all remember the old Alive Now devotionals that were put out through the Methodist publishing house down in Nashville. What is that? Discipleship Resources. I was a devotee of these, and I have a stack of them, and I pull them out every now and then for staff meeting devotionals and other things, mainly because I didn't get them all read when they came in the mail, and I kind of like the idea of checking them out, and they're pretty good. Anyway, they have a whole issue on the abundant life, and I was thinking about vitality and abundant life, kind of not being too far from each other. So I found just a very quick little meditation. It's actually by Dr. Luis Pedraja, who is a native of Cuba, but at the time of this writing, he was professor of theology at Memphis Theological Seminary. So there's a Tennessee connection there. And he just has a quick, they asked several theologians the question, what is the abundant life? And I thought this was helpful as we're asking the question tonight about vitality and what is a vital congregation? What is an abundant congregation? So Dr. Pedraja says, some mistakenly believe that abundant life is about wealth or prosperity. Others may believe it involves health and well-being. However, the abundant life is not about wealth, health, or prosperity. It's not about bliss or freedom from suffering. It's not even about life beyond death. Nor can we measure it by the quality, quantity, or length of life. That really spoke to me when we're talking about congregations. The abundant life is not a measure of life at all, but it is a way of living. It's not about having, it's about giving. The abundant life is about abundant love and abundant giving. It involves trust, courage, and sacrifice. It shows in our willingness to give of ourselves freely and fully to others without expectations or qualifications, letting our lives and our love overflow to fill the voids and wants of a broken and hurting world. The abundant life reflects God's gifts of love and life as they become fully present in our lives. Resting upon the hope and promises that in spite of death and suffering, life will prevail, that in spite of hatred and violence, love and peace will triumph. We live in the face of death, and we love in spite of hatred. Living in the faith and assurance that God, who is the very source of our life and being, loves us. We are made free to live for others and to love others. The abundant life is the reflection of the abundance of God's love on earth, manifested in and through our lives. I'll say a prayer to get us started, and we'll dive right in. Gracious, abundant God, we give you thanks and praise for yet another time to gather with people of goodwill and like-minded thoughts and hopeful anticipation. We give you thanks for a time set aside in the virtual world to be able to grow in faith with one another, to learn from one another, and hopefully hear your voice speaking through one another. We ask, oh God, tonight that as we talk about our communities of faith, our congregations, our institutions, that we remind ourselves that you care oftentimes so little about the things that we are anxious about day in and day out, but in fact, you look for what the writer just said. You look for us letting your love flow through us to others, helping those who yearn for love and yearn for hope, and yearn for freedom. So may what we do tonight help us live the abundant life, help our congregations be truly vital, not according to worldly standards, but according to the love that you poured out through us in Jesus Christ. So bless our time together tonight and all we who participate. All this we pray in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. I think what Alan and Crystal and I talked about for tonight was really turning this attention to you. We've spent 4 Monday evenings together to think about church vitality from different vantage points, different ways of thinking about church vitality. And now we're wondering, given your past experience and all of the readings I'm sure that each of you have done, wondering if you can share with each other what you think church vitality is, and see if you can come to some agreement together rather than different points of view. Let's see if we can't have a conversation that moves us in a direction as a group. What is church vitality?
I would suggest mark of faithfulness. How that is measured, of course, it's up to everyone's heart on that, but that has to be first. And I believe that numbers and other kind of head indicators will follow through, but you have to gauge the heart first. And to me, the first indication is concern beyond our own congregation, for greater mission and for God's kingdom in our community and beyond.
Thank you, Paul.
Alan, I like what you read to us tonight, because I thought, oh man, he's messing with my feelings and my thinking right now about all of this. But I think it truly does, for me, it goes into two veins. One, finding out what God wants you to do, and then doing it. And so that takes some discernment and listening. And that equals vitality. But also, in the other vein, living a life of abundance. Mm-hmm. And yes, we can all see, with or without glasses, you can see. Even Ray Charles could discern. We know that there is scarcity in the world. We know that there's not enough food for people to eat. However, not getting stuck in scarcity, because it starts up here, but to see that there's something bigger. So trying to live in that abundance. So to me, it is finding out what God wants you to do and then doing it, and moving from a mindset of fear and scarcity to a mindset that says there is enough. And when we can do that, to me, I'm on a road to vitality.
Alan made a statement where he was talking about it's about giving. And vitality, I guess, piggybacking on that, I'm thinking about the ways in which the gifts of the Spirit result in the fruit of the Spirit, and thinking of generosity as a way to describe that. Generosity, hospitality, um, a lavish and overflowing love from God that we reflect back to one another and to the world and our neighbors and in our congregations. From a congregational perspective, just in general, even whatever word we're going to use, I keep reflecting with folks in congregations about how the test for our life, so the test of our vitality, is what happens in the lives of the people we encounter, and what happens in the lives of the people who participate in our collective life. Are we closer to God? Do we love God more? Do we love our neighbor more? Are we more in tune with what, not just as Crystal said, what God wants us to do, but are we more in tune with where is God already working so we can join God there?
Michael, as you and Crystal both speak, I kept thinking to myself that I think one of the conundrums we've got ourselves into is that we remember the days of the church, that outpouring, that abundance, that outpouring of the love of God poured upon us, refreshed us, gave us new life. And I think our congregations genuinely want that for others. The problem is that we get stuck with the way it came to us. You know, for me, it was a youth group of 25 to 30, kids, that did all these activities and played volleyball every Sunday night afterwards. And if I try to recreate that now in all of our churches, I'm not sure that that's exactly what needs to happen. I think we get caught up in the way the love is poured out. For some it may be chicken dinners or other things, rather than really, I think, where the abundance is, and that sense of belonging, that sense of being included, that sense of being part of a larger whole. Anyway, that's just one of the things that came to my mind, is the mechanics of it get in the way of the faithfulness of it.
I'm reading Brad's comment about, do we measure it in the church by asking if the church is doing what is vital in the community and what is vital for the members? And I'm wondering if the word vital isn't part of our problem. For the past 25, 30 years, the church has shifted so much that for a lot of churches, the question isn't whether we're vital, but whether we are alive. Are we dying or are we alive? And how do we know that we're alive? And how do we know that we're alive in something holy, or we're alive in just maintaining a structure? So I think maybe the word vital is our problem. Like for me, I know that I'm in a vital or an alive, a holy alive, when I can see the fruits of the Spirit are active and growing, not just within my congregation, but through my congregation beyond my walls. That's how I measure vitality, is by the fruits of the Spirit and whether I see them growing, flourishing in some places, or whether I need to work in certain areas to kind of encourage that kind of growth. But I think for a lot of us, we've spent the last 30 years trying not to be a dying church. And so the word vital, it's very easy to say, I have a vital ministry, or there's a vital component, but am I a living, breathing holiness in my church?
I just want to second that motion to what you're saying. I agree, and that's the reason why, you know, really, what's happening in the lives of the people we encounter. Where is God already working so we can join God on the journey? I think that's why it's so important to ask those questions. And a lot of times we're wondering if what we're even talking about is measurable. Well, it's not measurable, Alan, by the mechanics and the mechanisms. You know, it's really measurable by the ministry. And we ask a question, tell us a story and a time when, you know, and you finish that. If you have no story, if you have no time when, then you got to go get a story, because all we are really as a people are the sum total of our experiences. So if we don't have a story and a time when and who was there and what we were doing and how the love of God was in full operation, I don't care how many dollars you have in the bank. Are you really helping anybody? You know, the Great Commission, is it really happening? I'm not opposed to dollars in the bank. But it is true. You know, you see congregations with money, but they got 6 people. So I'm coming to Ohio so we can have a further discussion on this.
Great.
Well, I have to be honest, Crystal. I mean, I also look at, there are 5 expressions for me. You know, I'm always looking at worship, education, fellowship, worship, education, fellowship, stewardship, missions, and mission. But there are 5 basically that I'm always looking at and seeing, okay, how are we growing? Are these things happening? Because those are the pieces that I can look at to say our mission life is growing, but our worship life is not, or our fellowship life is growing, but our stewardship is not. They all need to kind of be working in balance. And I need to see the fruits of the Spirit moving in all of them.
Yeah, I think in the late 90s, in the early 2000s, they had natural church development. Are you all familiar with that? NCD?
Yes.
Yep.
They had the colors and all of this stuff, and they had 8 themes or competencies that they measured your church by. And so it was worship, you know, it was fellowship, it was mission, but they also ask about inspiration. Were people inspired to be here? Were people motivated to be here? And out of that natural church development, it was, number 1, tell me a story and tell me a time when your church changed the lives of people. And then how do you measure success in your church? And they said success is finding out what God wants you to do and really do it. And so we tried in the late 90s and the early 2000s to move us away, or plant the seed to move us away from this. How do you measure it? By the numbers. You know, Mr. Guy out there counting with his pencil up in the balcony, moving away from that to how are people's lives being changed and affected. And I thought we were kind of on the road to that. But when we talk about convergence and divergence, I'm wondering, and these are just wonders in my mind, y'all, no assumptions, just wonder. if convergence somehow started choking the life out of the opportunity we were given to look at worship, to look at inspiration, to look at mission, you know, and in some kind of way said, that's not how you really do it. So scrap all of that and go back to putting Mr. Man in the balcony counting and looking at the numbers and looking at the dollars in the church saying, if you don't have this number of people coming, if you don't have this much money in the bank, then you are not vital. So I think we're struggling.
I wonder if people became afraid.
Yes.
You know, and that's what put us back to counting numbers and counting dollar signs, because that comes out of fear. And the sense of being in a place of abundance, that's a complete opposite to fear. But we live in a country and in a world where fear is so overpowering in life. You know,
So let's
people are
check in.
they are encountering fear you watch the news, you watch TV, it is just complete fear mongering. And I think that's translated in the church. And well, how many are you worshiping on Sunday? Did you pay your bills in COVID? And I've gotten to the point I say, well, you know, we have children. So I got to say we're doing good. Yeah. Or I come up with strange answers like, well, there are more than 2 or 3 of us. So we're worshiping and Jesus is there. But I think those questions of money and numbers come out of fear. And we've gotten into a lot of that.
Let me check in. Hang on. Let me slow the train down a little bit. See if we can get some other voices in here and see if maybe Tana and David and Russ want to add anything to this conversation.
I'm just riding along with you.
That's fine.
hear it.
Perfectly fine.
The questions of vitality are getting confronted in some places, including my place, with viability. We're looking at what we have and laying those assets up against, you know, what we are predicting over the coming 3 to 5 years and asking the questions of viability. And so our focus has gotten shifted completely off of vitality, which is where it needs to be. We don't celebrate our abundance very well. I mean, the staff does. A few of the leaders do. But the buzz underneath the surface is, we're going to have to close the door in 3 years. No, don't. If you look at the viability questions, you know, intelligently, you realign the staff, you make things different, and you keep going. But the focus is gone. So I don't know how to get that back to missional focus again.
Appreciate that, David. I think that's a great, I think there's a lot of churches that are, and I think that's some of what I hear the conversation being about. That fear just is so easy to be swept up into that all of a sudden the conversation on vitality switches to something else, which is their pursuit of wanting to be vital, but they don't know how. And so we're going to focus on, can we even be here in 3 years? And I think that's very, very common today from my experiences working with churches all across Nebraska.
And
were you going to say something?
If I could just reflect on David's, because he and I have been in conversation about this, it's just really hard when you're in a group, and I think it's harder post-COVID, not because I think everything should be post-COVID or whatever, but I do think that gave us a particular exhaustion level. And so when someone comes in and counts the numbers, it's even harder to counteract that. You know, if maybe one of your beloved programs had to be canceled or at least put on minimal level for a few years, and then suddenly you've got someone looking at, you know, the amount of money in the bank and the number of years and how much the pastor's salary is. It's really hard to turn and say, but you know, we feed 100 people every Sunday. Well, we haven't done that since before. So I think we've lost our tenacity, lost our gumption to be able to kind of confront the numbers counters with, but we do great ministry, but people's lives are touched. But is that a little bit about what you're struggling with, David?
Yes. And I go back to my friend Thad Allen's theory. Don't count the pond, count the stream. We want to count how many we worship on Sunday morning in the building. Of course, don't count those people that are online, although they're sending money. But the stream of people that go through our care and through our building over the course of a week is extraordinary. We're doing stuff. We are vital in that we are doing the mission that we've always done, COVID or no COVID. But we see a loss of funds and we see a reduced number on Sunday mornings, and that seems to drive the populace.
I'll make a connection here. This last week, we had a clergy conversation call here in Ohio, and we talked about revising governing documents for mission and ministry for the, you know, for now in the future. And, you know, getting away from, you know, you have to have 1,000 people on the board and every elder and every deacon and every trustee and all that. And one amongst us that talked was Chris Stark, pastor out at Niles. When he was at Lakewood, he did a complete revision. And one of the things they confronted was this sense of membership only was about people who put their butt in a pew, excuse my language, on Sunday morning at 10:30. That's the only way you could be a member, is if you put your butt on a pew on Sunday morning. And I still remember I was inspired by Chris at that time. I was pastor at Franklin Circle, and I said, we were doing our constitution and bylaws revision, and I said, what if we counted everybody who came through this building or was touched by one of our ministries out in the world as a member for that month? So everybody that came to the meal program on our third Sunday meal, everybody that came to the yoga group downstairs, everybody that came to the community forum on housing development, you know, that the city councilman put forth. What if that month we would easily say, plus everybody that came to worship, we could easily say we had 500 members served that month. What would that mean for a congregation to feel like, oh my God, yeah, that's exciting ministry. And so, David, as you're talking that kind of thing, how do we interpret that in a different way? Because that's just one thought. I think our churches are doing great ministry and touching people's lives, but we just don't count it. No. They don't count.
It seems to me, to get back to what I heard Crystal talking about, and much of what Heather was saying about, that's really the story of the church, right? Like, what story do we tell when people ask us, so you go to First Christian Church, tell me about your church. Well, we're really working hard, we're struggling, but we're small but mighty, right? Is that really our story? No, that's our anxiety. Our story is, holy crap, there's about 25 of us who worship on Sunday, and you wouldn't believe how many people we feed every Sunday morning. 500 people traipse through our building every month, whatever. Yeah, and we don't, I think you're right, Alan, and everybody. There's something about, it's not just, can we tell a church story, but which story are we choosing to tell? Heather wrote, David, are the numbers and fear the distraction from seeing where the Holy Spirit is producing fruits?
I think it distracts me some. I think it distracts
Hmm.
the leaders who are really engaged in what I think is promoting the vitality that we have a lot. I think it's really discouraging to them. I've seen it for so many years that I'm almost immune to it. But it's become post-COVID, it has become, more evident. And yeah.
I had a wonderful God moment on Sunday. That's yesterday, right? Went to a rural congregation town of maybe 800 people, and they don't have a called pastor. They haven't had one since the prior pastor retired maybe 4 years ago. And so they have consistent but rotating pulpit supply. And I was in the Sunday school, which was about 12 strong, and the pastor wasn't there. He was arriving and getting ready for worship. And then all of a sudden in walks a young man. Of course, I don't know who's belongs to the church or who doesn't or who had been there before. Kind of a small, wiry guy. His left hand was completely covered in tattoos. But he did not hesitate to share his story that he had a life of drugs and narcotics and crime and hatred and was in prison in and out for most of his life. And then 3 years ago found Jesus. And he is so hungry that, he drove around the church 2 blocks trying to decide where to go because he was tired of driving an hour away to where his father-in-law was. And says, I was just drawn into this church. And he walked in, and then seeing that Sunday school welcome him, basically giving him, the elevator speech, if you will, on who they are as a church, knew nothing about disciples or anything about the people, new in town, but he says, I'm a recluse and I don't know anybody. But the things that they shared to them to introduce the church, which I heard is most important to them, was their care for one another, their community suppers that they host in the park for anybody to come, the Christmas collections that they do for people in need, and on and on and on. It was not at all about, oh, we like each other, or, this is our home on Sunday morning. It was extremely beautiful. And I hope they heard themselves speak. And otherwise, you would walk past and think, oh, this church is just like any other. But man, that young man is on fire. And we had a conversation afterward about he wants to become a minister, when I shared, there's a pathway for you to become a commissioned minister in our church. And so he showed me the form he filled out today. So who knows what that'll become. But yeah, telling I say that because I heard Crystal say, tell the story. And that happened, and I think a story is still going to be told.
I've heard a lot about post-COVID from everybody talking about, since COVID. But then I look at, I do the church's website, and we always post the videos, the sermons from Sunday on our website. And I look at the people that we are connecting with. We're connecting with people from Russia. We're connecting with people from China. And yeah, they don't come to our church. They don't give us money, but they're hearing God's message. So to me, that's a vital part of our church, of our ministry, because people are listening to God's word. And I think in some of these countries, they're not even supposed to. I don't know that for a fact, but to me, that's we've got to be available for people no matter what is happening in our church. And we've got to count everything that we're doing, not count it like number wise, but say, you know, oh, okay, I talked to 5 people this week and we talked about God. Well, that's our church reaching out to people in the community. So
Thank you, Dan.
I wanna just say thank you to Tana as well, because we're here, y'all. And I think whoever you reach, whenever you reach, you have to make sure you're not playing with it. And you know what I mean by that, that every opportunity is an opportunity. I wrote down on my paper, appreciative inquiry. And one of the things that Mark Law Bronson says is one of his tenets is what you focus on becomes your reality. And he says organizations are like plants. They're heliotropic. They lean toward the sun or whatever is giving them life. And so if you're not giving life, then you're giving death. And so whenever I have done appreciative inquiry, I use the Philippians text. Think on these things, you know, and what's lovely, what's pure, what's of good report, what's noble, and asking congregations, what are you doing? And how are you thinking on these things? Because if we don't start counting the people in Russia, and yes, Russia is a communist country, in China as well. If we don't start counting them as part of our family, if we don't count the people who are in AA and NA and voters and all of that, then we miss out on an opportunity. We miss that.
Preach it.
Because if y'all come to my church, I'm gonna count you. I am. I'm gonna count you for that Sunday. You are part of my church.
So given everything you've heard, any way to define what is church vitality for you? This is kind of like asking a church, what is our theology, which we spent last Monday talking about, and getting a church to agree to a common theology from all the people with all of the different theologies that we have. What is church vitality for us as a group? Heather, I want to tell you, in this last week, since last Monday, when you told that story about the woman in your church who did the cinnamon rolls, I've told that story probably 3 times as a way of saying, love God, love people. And here's this wonderful woman who she's not sure how she can contribute to this event, and she did. And so as I'm encouraging our churches, how do we come together? How do we discern who we are as a church? What is that theology that we can claim together? Oh my goodness. People, when they hear that story, again, this is the power of story, right? When they hear that story, it's like a light bulb starts to go, it flickers. I can't say it goes on completely, but there's a flicker there that wasn't there when I raised the question of what is the theology of this church? That's just so hard for people to even, I don't think it's a mind opener. I think it somehow shuts people down, but the story opens people up. So Tana says, I see church vitality as spreading the love of God to world and neighbors. Sounds a bit like Matthew 22, right? Isn't that the lectionary reading from Sunday?
I've been reflecting on a couple of different kinds of stories, but um, our conversation in the middle of this conversation, just talking about vitality is life and living. And we've been having this conversation. The story that comes to mind is there are two of them. One is family. Um, my grandfather died of heart failure when I was a freshman in college. But I remember being early in high school. I was about 14 or 15. We went to visit him, and his wife, our step grandmother, was so nervous about his health that basically she would not permit him to be active for fear of what bad thing might happen to him. And what the result was for him was he got depressed. The depression was awful. And my older brother and I, of all things, just the thing that gave him joy, the one afternoon in that weekend that we were there to visit, my brother, who's older than me, so he had a car and he drove. We snuck my grandfather out of the house, and I say we did this under her nose, like she didn't know that he was leaving the house. But we put him in the car and we drove him to the golf course and went to the driving range, and he hit a bucket of balls. It was an hour away from the house. And it was like it wasn't just that his face went from pale to flush. It was the life and the energy came back into his spirit. And the other relates in ministry. The other part, the story that keeps going to that, is part of the difficulty and the heartbreakingness sometimes of visiting church folk in nursing homes in particular. And that struggle, especially there, between existence and life is how to, and the struggle that's real is the difference in, no matter where you're living and what your body is doing, the struggle is between living as long as you live versus hanging out and spending time in God's waiting, where you're just waiting for it to be over. And I think about that a lot. It's life is that, whatever our age, life is full of risk and danger, and bad things can happen. And yet the adventure of our faith, the adventure of our life, is to live it. And even in church, you talk about being in active ministry, and the moment becomes, but what if it's too late for our survival? And the answer in a lot of ways becomes, then we'll die loving and we'll die living. And that will be a better life from today until whenever that is anyway.
We'll die having fun.
Well, whether or not it's fun, we'll die living. We won't be caught up in the fear of the money's going to run out, or I'm going to drop dead, or I'm going to, whatever that thing is.
So I appreciate that. I'm kind of spinning in what I'm hearing you say makes a lot of thoughts spin in my head. So let me see if I can at least try to get to a question or an observation. Because I think that what you're saying is right on target. I think we've got a lot of people sitting in God's waiting room. and they don't know that that's what they're doing. They think they are living. But they don't know that they have other choices, even when we beckon them forward and say, there is another way to do this. Yes, it probably includes some level of risk, but, and so it becomes something, the conversation changes to something else. And I wonder, I mean, if that's true, if my sense is that we've got a lot of people waiting in God's waiting room, and I think that's what you're hinting at, but I don't want to put words in your mouth. But if that's true, my sense about dysfunctionality is that things function exactly the way they're supposed to benefit the people that they're serving. So if that's true about the church, then what are we doing in our very design that suggests to people that that's really the best that we've got to offer, and that's going to benefit you being who you are? That's a question. But I don't want to stop there, because I think the other side of that question is the one that I've been trying to wrestle with all night, is when we think about measuring vitality. The word that keeps popping in my mind is from Parker Palmer, and that is being faithful. The only thing that we should be measuring ourselves against is our faithfulness. And I don't know of any measuring stick for that. None. I can't think of one. I mean, you can create things, but for me, I don't know that you can measure faithfulness except by being in community with one another, where you can describe how what I'm saying, what I'm doing, what I believe is faithful. And the community can say, I hear you, brother, but have you thought about this? Have you considered the effect that attitude has on people in this way? Challenge us in a loving, caring, supporting way, but challenge us in what we think is being faithful. Remember, it was 100 some years ago that the church claimed it was faithful to enslave people because of the color of their skin. And they didn't blink an eye to do something like that. So I want to be in community where there's that challenge of, well, what is faithful? Right? Julie and I have some friends who are very active Quakers, and Jean adopted 2 Native American children. Jean's 92, still vibrant, still active. And she was part of the Quaker meeting house that helped to establish an Indian boarding school, in full belief that the Quakers were doing what was loving and caring and kind and peaceful, in line with their theology. And today she is really torn apart with that question. She is, at 92, her faith is shaken because she knows full and well that was horrible. But it was what she believed to be faithful at the time. So what is being faithful? So those are the questions that kind of surface for me about that.
I like those questions, but you send me right back to Ohio with Heather. With those, because it's really looking at the gifts that God has given me and seeing whether or not they align with the fruit of the Spirit. Because what I refuse to do is Gerber feed the church. That's different from giving babies milk and then moving them through teaching and they grow up into the fullness of their faith. But Gerber feeding folks by not asking them to take a look at their faith and their spirituality and see where it's taking them. And do you even know the fruit of the Spirit? You know, you've been here 175 years. You're as old as the cornerstone in some of these churches. And what has that led you to? You know, because if you have not told anybody about your wonderful church, if you have not told anybody about Jesus, we need to ask you to do it, and you need to give yourself permission, because that is measurable. You know, even the greatest conflict that's going on right now, right before our very eyes, Israel and Palestine, people are asking, what side are you on? You know, and this could be the church's finest hour, or it could be our floppiest hour. You know, I told somebody, I said, I can't see a side. You want to know why I can't see a side? Because I'm too busy seeing people starving. I'm too busy seeing babies being murdered. I can't see a side right now. Ask me when we get those trucks over the line and people have water and food and shelter and all of that, then I might be able to see a side, you know, because if we can't, and I'm not trying to be political, I'm just simply saying, we have to ask the question of the folks we are dealing with, Pastor Chris. What is faithfulness? And to the best of our knowledge, this is what it is. And let the Holy Spirit be at work. Otherwise, we're just simply a country club, a social club, you know, and we're not that. We're the church. This has been so good to me.
I think the other thing in the midst of that, when we talk about the fruit of the Spirit and we talk about being faithful to the Spirit, yes, it is, Heather. You're right. Peace is a fruit of the Spirit. And, you know, it's also one of the Beatitudes. Blessed are who? Was it Vondergat? Did anybody else see the Facebook posting about Vondergat's statement about, I'm so tired of people talking about getting the commandments posted on the school walls. When was the last time they posted the Beatitude, blessed is a peacemaker, on the Pentagon wall? It's a great question. Sorry, little squirrel trail. Now, can I get back to where I was going? I doubt it. I think what we're starting to bump up against, which I think is where I experience, and I need to check out with you all, what's your experience with people in the church? I experience people kind of starting to check out when the conversation starts to get to this level of consideration, because I think we're entering the limits of language and the mystery of God. And so we use language like fruits of the Spirit, and even that really leaves us wanting, or at least leaves me wanting. There's a list, so it's a little bit more tangible. But anybody else bump into that, or do you have ways that you approach this that are engaging for church members?
I'll be honest, Chris. One of the things I've noticed is a confusion of the gifts and the fruits being the same thing. So I think for a lot of church members, they don't know the difference between gifts and fruits. And so when I've clarified that and I've said that the fruits of the Spirit are evidence that we're doing what we're called to be doing, it has opened doors. But to start to educate people in that has been really helpful, because I know for a long time I'd hear, oh, well, let's do the fruits of the Spirit. And I'd hear or let's do the gifts of the Spirit. And we'd hear the fruits played out as if they were interchangeable, and they're not. They complement, and you're using your gifts, and you can tell because the fruits are evident, but they're not the same thing. So there's a real lack of education for a lot of church people. I'm not saying that for you because I know better.
I know who you had for New Testament.
Heather, I'm going to tie, I know Brad has gone off, but I'm still taken by his really early comment about vitality being for the community and vitality being for the members. And I think I'm connecting it with your fruits and gifts, because I think the church members need to seek the gifts of God and develop the gifts of God. And then when they are put into action or are realized, then the fruit oftentimes then is seen in the community. But I think we get those kind of backwards. Or to Chris's point about comfort, I think you're the one that used the word comfort. We want them both. I want to be gifted and I want the fruits. And I want it all mine. And I'm not sure that's exactly how faithfulness is. I think faithfulness is, trying to develop the gifts that God has given us and develop more in order to allow the fruits of the Spirit then to flourish. And hopefully it flourishes in the community itself, but it's really not that kind of possessive thing. I do this so that I can get it, but I do this so that the people of God can flourish. And so I thought I wish Brad were here to talk about that, because I was seeing him, kind of not put against each other, but contrast the church members and the community around and how that works.
Well, Alan, I think you had it in our devotional time. We're gifted to give it away. And so maybe that's a good measurement for vitality, is what we've gotten rid of.
That's intriguing.
Yeah. David, I'm going to see if I understood that. It is intriguing. What my mother taught me was to say, well, that's interesting, because I don't know what else to say. So I'm going to try. I'm going to take a risk here. One thing that I think that we might be getting rid of is that large church is good church, right? The downtown cathedrals are all pretty much empty for the most part that I know of, but the mega churches are booming like crazy. Am I close to what you were thinking, or were you in a totally different place?
I was thinking a little more communally.
Okay.
When I think of what I've seen that I really am especially grateful for in my congregation, is that they have learned that territorialism over the building, over their assets in general, over their monies, that's not as important as serving the community. So when a preschool needed somewhere to be, we were willing to give up part of our gorgeous, newly renovated fellowship hall so that they could exist in there. We gave up a whole wing of the church to a counseling center because they needed somewhere to be and couldn't afford to do the full ride in typical business property. I see them willing to write the check on things that are totally not self-serving. The question had always been, how many members will this get us?
The return on investment.
And I don't even hear them talking thank God about, well, we have this preschool here and none of those families have come to our church. Well, yeah, they're there every day. What are you going to do about it? I really expected that, and it has not happened. So, in a sense, I think that kind of, I don't know what the word is I'm looking for, but disbursement of who we are or think we are, to others may be a sign of vitality. Or it may just be bad business practice. I don't know.
Yeah, I remember our church had a meal. I don't even say it's a meal program. We served a meal on Saturday nights. Y'all welcome. And among those who came, there were a number of houseless people, marginally displaced, and we encouraged our folks to come, even if they have a fridge full of food, just for fellowship with them. But I remember one of the houseless men, I overheard him talking, because we were serving them. That was one of our joys. They don't get to go to restaurants, so we were the wait staff, and brought the meal to them instead of buffet line, all that stuff. And I heard one of the men tell his friend, says, "Oh, I sure love my church." He never worshiped and never put a dime in the offering plate or whatever, but that was a golden moment for me.
David and Paul, you remind me of a recent experience I had. One of our churches that closed and sold its building waited to give me the documents to be able to actually make it closed, in the database, because they wanted to celebrate their 150th anniversary. So they were already closed, but they were still going to celebrate their 150th. And part of the program was the new church that owned the building allowed them to have a portion of Sunday morning to do this 150th. And part of it was to read the history of the church. And I was gobsmacked. I was completely amazed. She talked for about 10 minutes. Lovely person, beautiful, beautiful human being. But for 10 minutes, most everything about the history of the church was when the building was erected, when they got air conditioning, when they got the elevator, when they remodeled the fellowship hall, when it was really a litany of building improvements. And the kind of negative regional minister, the one that sits on one of these shoulders, says that's why we're dying, because we cannot tell the history of the church unless through the eyes of a building campaign. But there was one shining moment, and you'll see this is the connection between what you said, Paul, and what you said, David, and that is the one thing that brightened my hope was they said, right after they said, we remodeled the fellowship hall and we became the first church to house the homeless ministry of this town. And we're very proud of that, she said kind of offhandedly. It's like, wow, that one ministry moment in the midst of all of that. I don't know why I shared that, except that I do know coming into this call, Chris, I was going to ask the question, maybe church vitality is when we can tell the history of the church through mission moments and never mention the building or even the list of ministers, because we all know that's another history of the church is, we'll tell the history of the ministers. So I wonder if church vitality is being able to tell our church's story in terms of mission and ministry and not building and ministers. There, I said it.
What's on your mind and hearts now after these 4 Sundays and an hour this evening?
On my heart is that we are the mighty Christian church, disciples of Christ in the United States and Canada and the Congo, for those who that we are the Christian church, the Stone Campbell movement. And we've been able to do many things and help many people over the century, last almost 2 centuries. And that's been wonderful. But there's a question on the table now that deals with everything we've been talking about, the convergence and the divergence. The spirit, where is the spirit moving us? And do we have enough? Do we hear the call loud enough to move in the direction that Jesus is calling us? Not Alexander, not Barton, not their descendants, not the first lady who put the brick in, but Jesus is calling us. And everything we've been discussing, are we willing to live into, to first learn our gifts, live into them, and allow the fruit of the Spirit to be manifested amongst us? Will we be the church? And do we have enough strength to take our eyes off of what other people are doing, other denominations, and ask God to lead and guide us, and to know that we are enough. We are enough. We are loved. We are enough. And so it's a wonder. I wonder.
Thank you.
I think there's a lot about being church that's exciting. I think being Christian church disciples of Christ is truly exciting. We offer the world a relationship with God. It doesn't matter where you come from. It doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter how broken or how unbroken or anything. But we're not going to offer you a relationship of judgment, but a relationship of love. I think being the Christian church is full of possibility. So yes, Crystal, yes, keep preaching. I don't think fear is going to win. I think God is.
I'm wondering how we create opportunities for people to come together like this, to explore what it is that we're all trying to do to not just reimagine church, but experiment and explore with new ideas and ways of really thinking and talking about church, the church stories that we tell. And I don't think we can do it alone, but if it sure seems like there's a lot of lone rangers, and I think I struggle with how do we extend an invitation that actually people are open to. And I can't control that. You can't control that. I know that. I understand that. But that's what I'm left wondering. It's like, how do we bring people together in these kinds of conversations, ways that are generative and attractive, so that people want to come? For instance, Crystal, you mentioned appreciative inquiry. There's a book by a Presbyterian minister and professor out in California, I think in Orlando, who did a whole church. He came in as a long-term interim over a period of years and used appreciative inquiry from beginning to end as a way to help the church explore. And is that of interest to people, that we would maybe look at how could appreciative inquiry help us? Or what are some other tools, ways of being together?
You know, I feel like there are options at General Assembly we can be a part of, Regional Assembly we can be a part of, and even in our home regions, just offering the opportunity to be in conversation with one another and asking people, are you willing now to sit with other folks? You know, you sat with the folks in Tennessee. Now, are you willing to journey with me to Ohio or Mid-America? Or what if all of our friends, or as many as our friends as possible, would come on? I think those are avenues. I think in our individual churches that we go back and we share. I mean, we ask the question. We ask pertinent questions. I think we write about it. I'm looking at writers on this screen that we tell the story. We write about it. We do videos about it. Just literally asking the question and extending invitation, I think, is limitless. We're not confined, I don't think, by boundaries, because underneath it all, every congregation is continuing to ask the question. You know, I sit here in Tennessee with a lot of the denomination's largest churches. And when I walk in there, I have seen decline,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and not just because people died, but because people jettisoned. So, you know, I think we're not confined. I think we can, any way we could think of, you all, anything we can think of is possible. Yes. Yeah. I'm just going to be honest. I don't think you'll have people who will be willing to give you four Mondays.
No, that's right.
You know, you have 45 sign up for this, and this is the remnant of what we had each week, which has been a blessing, which enabled us to have a real conversation. But going in and getting that permission and building that relationship and asking people, are you willing to go deeper? Because if you are, then here's the next step.
And it might be that those 45 registrants is the beginning, not the remnant, right? But the beginning. Because
Yeah.
we've got some people who are we are posting these to our website and letting people know these are available. I know that in our quarterly we put out a different brochure, and this quarter it includes not only the Christmas offering and DMF interpretation, but also this. And when I point out that panel on the brochure, people's eyes light up. Like, what? You're doing what? And I'm thinking, what? We send that this brochure goes out, our newsletter goes out to 1,300 households every week. And people are just that overwhelmed. So it's that personal touch. It's a relationship I think you're talking about, Heather. It's the relationship. And it'll slowly build by word of mouth if it's going to build anything. But I love your idea, Crystal, when you mentioned we've got some people here who could be doing some writing. Right? And that's another way to reach people and invite people into conversations.
I'll be honest, I'm here because of you, Chris.
Oh, well, thank you.
Straight up. I mean, the book was enticing, but to be in sessions with you and to be able to spend this time, that's been important to us. You know, so to us, or at least me, it's been the relational piece, being in this and getting to know Crystal and being here with Alan and Paul, I mean, and everybody else. I don't want to leave anybody else out, but that's what's been so important to us. The topic has been secondary, if I'm honest. The relationships are critical.
Thank you for saying that. And I think you're right. I think it is about the relationship. When we do our clergy retreat every winter, it doesn't matter how good the topic is. The number one reason people come is for the fellowship and the relationship, which I believe reflects our churches. So I get our emphasis on mission, but people are telling us over and over again, it's about the relationships. And when those relationships become unhealthy and even sometimes toxic, I think that's some of the jettisoning, if that's the right way to conjugate that word. I don't know if it is or not.
Well, we know what jettison means.
Thank you.
And I think Heather is correct. I wanted to be here with you all because I wanted to hear what you had to say. What you had to say next. That was very important to me. I see the three on my screen. They're in one line. Alan, Chris, and Paul. I see them a lot. So I wasn't over the moon about seeing them again because I'm going to see them again. So, but to hear what you all had to say, which is very valuable, and on point to where I've seen the church in the last 27 years.
For me, I wasn't, like, we had the first meeting and that was very interesting to me. And so I came back to the second meeting and then I figured out that most of you guys are ministers. And I'm like, I don't really belong, because I'm just a layperson, I'm not a minister. But I keep coming back because I want to hear what you guys are saying and I'm learning and I'm sharing that with the congregation from my local church. And, and I think if we continue to do that, maybe we can get more people involved. I think this group is like a stepping stone for other people to then become involved in. Because you said we had 45 people signed up. Well, maybe it just didn't work out, or maybe they had family issues come up or whatever. And so now we can have, you know, if we do this on a different topic or even on the same topic and just have different people that sign up, that would be a good stepping stone for more people.
Thank you, Tiana. And I'm glad you hung in there. I'm glad you're here.
One thing that's unique, talking about sacred conversations of whoever responds, whoever says yes to the y'all come, this is at least to my knowledge, a rare opportunity. And I thank you, Chris, for inviting Crystal and Alan to co-lead with you. And I thought, oh, that's a trio I want to be a part of. So I joined the three amigos and and then get to meet your wonderful leaders in your great region too, and all the perspectives. So yeah, that in itself is a way to connect. It's developing new patterns, because I don't think it's done often enough, if at all.
Thanks, Paul. Heather, I think your reflection in the chat room is exactly what I think many of us are agreeing to tonight. Is vitality really isn't about the numbers, it's about the relationships. It's being in relationship with each other regardless of the numbers, and having when I felt called to regional ministry, I knew relationships were critical. For some reason, the calling, that discernment time with me and God, and in conversation with a few people to try to discern my call, my next call, the word actually that made me stumble most was being in right relationships, which suggested to me it had something to do with reconciliation, probably with my own soul first. And I wonder if that's not a big element of vitality as well, as not just relationship, but reconciling with our own true selves and being able to show up in that way with other people who are trying the best that we know how to show up as our own true selves with one another. Well, any additional, maybe final thoughts for folks before we bid ourselves adieu?
My deep gratitude to everyone, because there was no element of this that didn't seem vital to me. And I think it was very life-giving. So I appreciate all of you.
Thank you, David. Well, I'll add my voice of thanks to Crystal and Alan to saying yes to the idea. It just seemed to kind of, the dots started to connect. It unfolded, it became what it is. So thank you for exploring and experimenting, because as one of you commented, regions don't do this very often. And I just don't know better. I just don't. it's like, well, this makes sense. Let's try this. So I'm glad that this came to be, and in whatever way, shape, or form. I'm grateful that you all have consistently shown up. I mean, this has been great, and it is a bit of a community. So what's next? I don't know. Seeing in an adaptive culture, which we in Nebraska are trying to embrace, becoming an adaptive culture, we don't have a leader who says, here's what's next. We ask the question back. What would make sense to you? What would you like to be next? Let's see if we can experiment and find something together. I'm going to be contacting you two anyway about something else. So, so we might be able to explore that. But let's open that to the whole room and to the 45 registrants. What is next? What's of interest? What's the itch that needs some scratching now? Is it appreciative inquiry in a tool like that, or is it broader scope? Do we ask Alan to talk to us about the Ohio Regional Assembly? That was a great big family picnic. No agenda? You know, I mean, I don't know. I don't know what's next. But I'm happy to be part of it because I really think this is for me the lifeblood of ministry in the church. Quite frank, I really believe that. Anything I can do to be a part of helping the church just explore what it means to be church, not to have an answer for it, but just explore and be part of that. Count me in. Go ahead, Michael.
No, I'm my piece, and as you mentioned, the big family reunion that we had at camp that we called our last regional assembly. The beauty of it was just the joy of being able to be together, and being part of ministry in Ohio for well, we moved to Ohio in ministry in 1997, and we've been in the state since then. And my memories of almost every time there was a regional assembly or a whole regional gathering, my memories of almost every conversation, public and private, when the whole body was gathered from 1997 until what seemed to always focus on what's wrong with the church. No matter what the program was, no matter what the the positive direction that was being sought or the new initiatives that were being announced, the meeting after the meeting was always about what was wrong with the church. And maybe we've been in congregations where it felt like that was what was going on too. This conversation is life-giving, and so thinking about how to proceed from here, to me, is the thing that I love about this, and the thing I loved about that agenda, or whatever the agenda is it is a joy and a celebration of my heart to be amongst people who are practitioners of the let's figure out what's right and run with it. And so I really appreciate that part of what we're doing, and am excited about whatever we're doing. Then this next would be great, but taking this experience and translating it to how do we do more of this in every place where we are, in our local congregations, amongst our colleagues, at district meetings, at regional assemblies, getting more people at the table that, some of us didn't know each other until we started doing this, all of those things. And that part is exciting. So
thank you. One idea that pops to mind as you're saying that, Michael, is I'm looking at you, Paul, and thinking about Ron. and the work that he's going to be doing, just like what you're describing, is bringing people together into this conversation in rural churches. And maybe we just, in 6 or 9 months, we check in with him to see how did the startup go and how are things going now, or something like that, and see if there's any insights or gleanings that he can share, and that we might chew on, not just talk at us, but really invite us into the conversation to explore. And so what might that mean in other regions beyond the Mid-America? Just a thought. I'm not sure it's a good one, but it popped in my head.
I hope we'll have something wonderful to report for you. It's going to be kind of a blitz, 6 congregations in 2 weeks.
Oh.
So everyone in the region will have a close proximity, we hope. But one totally wonderful direction, I think, is that we're going to be trying to match our anti-racism pro-reconciliation network with our rural church ministry network, to have them intersect together and to come to one accord, regardless of setting a ministry. So stay tuned on that. We're just beginning.
Okay. For those who don't know, I think Paul has mentioned it before, but just in case, the Mid-America region received a grant from the Orion Scott Foundation to really establish a rural church network relationships. That's really broad language. I know Paul will correct me if it's too far afield, but something akin to that. Which is fascinating to me. Yeah, when Ron told us about that during our retreat, I was really taken by that. Okay. Any other thoughts, reflections?
Just for you Ohio folks, I'll be partnering with the Ohio region in the spring sometime for a spiritual growth retreat, focusing with men. And so please stay tuned to that, and hope you can join us.
Wonderful.
That'll be great. All right. Well, thank you all very much. It's good to meet some of you and see others who I haven't seen in a while, and to be with all of you. Thank you. And we'll see what unfolds from here. Stay in touch. Blessings.
Bless you all. Take care.